Shalom, this is Rabbi Mark Hillel Kunis and my Taste of Torah for Parshat Korach, 5780. We've seen a month now of demonstrations over the unjust death of George Floyd. We've looked with shock as some of these demonstrations morphed into violent rioting. People have been severely injured defending their businesses. Others have died. In our Torah reading this week, there's also a demonstration that turns violent. It's the demonstration organized by Korach, Moses' cousin. Korach is an angry man, manipulative and deceitful. What gives Moses the right to dominate the people, he complains. It just doesn't seem fair that Moses should be the sole leader and Aaron and his sons be the Kohanim, the priests, to the exclusion of all the other Levites like himself. So he says, all the people are holy. Why do you put yourself above everyone else? Clearly, Korach has his own agenda. He wants to be the high priest, and so he gathers a crowd with similar agendas. They try to steal the leadership from Moses and Aaron, who never really wanted it in the first place. And this time it's God that directs a violent end, as the earth swallows them up. In Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, we learn that Korach's rebellion was a classic example of a machloket shelo l'shem shamayim, a controversy that is not for the sake of heaven. Such a controversy is doomed to failure because it's not about working things out, it's about divide and conquer. Almost all of America was behind the George Floyd protests for justice. Clearly, it was a protest for the sake of heaven. But when organized riots broke out and parts of cities swallowed up, like the new country of Chaz or Chop in Seattle or the Black House Autonomous Zone in Washington, D.C., then clearly it was no longer for the sake of heaven. Clearly, these people had their own agenda, far from that of justice for George Floyd or African Americans. It was no longer about ridding our world of the scourge of racism, but about a radical political agenda that includes violence. Hopefully the violence will end soon, and the perpetrators will somehow be figuratively swallowed up like Korach. In our personal lives, controversy with those we love is inevitable. So how do we learn to fight fairly and effectively? Here's a practical tip. When arguing, be self-reflective and not reactive. Ask yourself, even in the heat of the moment, what do I really want? And what can I say or do to be the most effective and get the most positive result to get what I want? Being violent, physically or emotionally, throwing verbal darts to hurt each other doesn't really get you what you want. It may feel good for a second, but it only makes things worse. And here's the amazing thing. How we argue can influence the kind of person our spouse becomes. We have the power to bring out the best or the worst in one another. What was it that made Korach so bitter and angry? According to the Midrash, it was his wife. The Midrash tells us that Korach's wife was ambitious. Korach was the wealthiest man in all of Israel. He was a cousin of Moses, so prestigious. But that wasn't enough. She desperately wanted to be the wife of the king or the wife of the high priest. And so she stirred him up into a frenzy that ultimately led to his rebellion. One of the chief followers of Korach, On ben Pelet, is an example how wives can bring out the best in their husbands. On is mentioned in the opening verse of the Torah reading along with Korach, but we don't see his name again. What happened? The Midrash tells us it was his wife. She was very wise and understood that if God chose Moses and Aaron to lead the Jewish people, it would not be good to try and change that. She also saw right through Korach that he was only out for himself. She convinced her husband On that he would gain nothing from this rebellion. In the end, she saved her husband and their entire family from the destruction of Korach. My friends, On's wife is a shining example of when you have a controversy with your loved ones. If you argue with love for the sake of heaven, for the sake of your loved ones, then you will be heard and you will make a positive difference. Being angry, being manipulative will get you absolutely nowhere. Instead, always be loving in the face of controversy, and that will get you what you need. Have a great Shabbos.